The giant metal doors of the Galactic Council chamber opened with a deep rumbling sound. Jake Morrison walked through them with his head held high, even though heavy chains bound his hands and feet. The chains made a clinking noise with each step he took on the smooth marble floor. Behind him, 2 tall alien guards in black armor followed closely, their plasma rifles ready to fire at any moment. The chamber was huge, bigger than any building Jake had ever seen on Earth. The ceiling stretched so high above that it disappeared into shadows. Thousands of seats filled the circular room, and beings from hundreds of different worlds sat watching. Some had blue skin, others had fur, and a few looked like giant insects. But they all had one thing in common. They were here to watch a human die. Jake tried not to think about his crew back on the ship. The Zephyrian Empire had let them go 3 days ago, calling it a gift of mercy. But Jake knew better. They wanted witnesses. They wanted the story to spread across human space about what happened to those who crossed the mighty Zephyrian Empire. At the center of the chamber stood a raised platform made of black stone. On top of it waited the executioner, a massive Zephyrian warrior wearing ceremonial red robes. His forearms each held a different weapon, but Jake could see the plasma blade glowing bright blue in his upper right hand. That was the one they would use. Ambassador Lisa Kane sat in the diplomatic section, her face pale as snow. She had been fighting for 3 weeks to save Jake's life, using every law and treaty she could find. But the Zephyrians were not interested in human laws. They followed their own ancient ways, and those ways demanded blood. Jake had been in the wrong place at the wrong time. His ship, the exploration vessel Horizon's Edge, had been mapping star systems near Zephyrian space when rebel forces attacked an Imperial convoy. The rebels escaped, but long-range sensors detected Jake's ship nearby. The Empire needed someone to blame for their embarrassing defeat, and a lone human vessel made a perfect target. The charges were simple but deadly: espionage, theft of Imperial technology, violation of sacred Zephyrian space. All lies, but lies, that would cost Jake his life. Emperor Valrock stood from his golden throne at the highest point in the chamber. He was an impressive sight, nearly 8 feet tall with purple skin that seemed to shimmer in the light. His voice boomed across the chamber without any need for amplification. "Citizens of the Empire and honored guests," he began, his words translated into dozens of languages through hidden speakers. "Today we gather to witness justice. The human before you has committed crimes against our people and our sacred traditions. By the ancient laws of our ancestors, he must pay with his life." Jake looked up at the Emperor and felt anger burning in his chest. 3 weeks of torture and interrogation had not broken him. They had used pain devices that made every nerve in his body feel like it was on fire. They had drugged him and tried to make him confess to things he had never done. But Jake Morrison was a ship captain, trained to resist exactly this kind of treatment. "I deny these charges," Jake called out, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber. "I am an innocent man, and my death will not bring you the justice you claim to seek." Some of the alien spectators made noises of approval, while others remained silent. Jake could see that not everyone agreed with what was happening, but fear of the Empire kept them quiet. Ambassador Kane stood up in her section, her hands shaking with emotion. "Your Majesty, I request one final appeal. Commander Morrison is a decorated officer with 20 years of service. He has saved countless lives and explored unknown regions of space for the betterment of all species. His only crime was being in the wrong system when your forces were defeated by rebels." The Emperor's 4 eyes fixed on her with obvious annoyance. "Ambassador Kane, your appeals have been heard and rejected. The evidence against this human is clear. He was found in restricted space following an attack on our vessels. Our laws are ancient and unchanging. Justice will be served." Lisa felt tears running down her face, but she refused to look away. Jake deserved to have someone witness his final moments, someone who would remember and tell his story. She had sent messages to Earth and to every human colony, but help would not arrive in time. The Empire had chosen their timing carefully. Jake was forced to kneel on the platform, his chains attached to hooks in the stone floor. The executioner stepped forward, Raising the plasma blade high above his head, the weapon hummed with deadly energy, hot enough to cut through steel like paper. "Any last words, human?" the executioner asked in broken English. Jake looked out at the thousands of faces watching him. Then his eyes found Lisa Kane in the crowd. She was crying openly now, but she was still watching. He smiled at her, trying to give her some small comfort. "Tell my crew that they were the best family a captain could ask for," he said clearly, "and tell humanity that Jake Morrison died standing up, not bowing down." The executioner nodded with what might have been respect. Even among the Zephyrians, courage in the face of death was honored. He raised the blade higher, preparing for the killing stroke. Lisa Kane watched in horror as the weapon began to fall. Time seemed to slow down as the blue light cut through the air toward Jake's neck. She wanted to close her eyes, to look away, but she forced herself to keep watching. This moment would be burned into her memory forever. The blade completed its deadly arc with a flash of blue light. Jake Morrison, captain of the Horizon's Edge, explorer of the unknown, protector of the innocent, was dead. His body fell forward, onto the black stone, and the chamber erupted in a mixture of cheers and shocked silence. Emperor Valrock raised his arms in victory. "Justice is done. Let all who oppose the Empire remember this day." But Lisa Kane was not thinking about justice or the Empire's victory. She was thinking about revenge as she watched Jake's body being dragged away by the guards. She made a promise that would change the fate of the entire Zephyrian Empire. They had killed an innocent man to save face after a military defeat. They had ignored every law of civilized conduct and murdered a diplomat's protected witness. Most importantly, they had underestimated what one human woman could do with enough time, patience, and pure hatred. The Empire would learn, Lisa thought as she stood to leave the chamber, that humans never forgot their own, and they never forgave those who spilled innocent blood. Jake Morrison's death would be avenged, even if it took years to accomplish. The Zephyrian Empire had made their worst enemy that day, though they would not realize it until it was far too late. 6 months had passed since Jake Morrison died on that Blackstone platform. Lisa Kane sat in her office on the space station, orbiting the neutral world of Haven Prime. The office looked normal enough, with its metal desk and computer screens. But Lisa was no longer the same woman who had watched her friend die. She had spent those 6 months learning everything she could about the Zephyrian Empire. Their trade routes, their allies, their enemies, their weaknesses. Lisa read reports until her eyes burned and studied economic data until the numbers filled her dreams. She was building a weapon, but not the kind that fired bullets or energy beams. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Ryan Brooks walked in, carrying a cup of coffee and a datapad. Ryan had been Jake's first officer on the Horizon's Edge. He was a tall man with brown hair and calm blue eyes, but Lisa could see the anger that lived beneath his quiet surface. "The morning reports, Ambassador," Ryan said, setting the coffee on her desk. He had resigned from ship duty 3 months ago to work with Lisa. Like her, he wanted justice for Jake Morrison. "What do we have today?" Lisa asked, taking a sip of the hot coffee. "The trade inspection program is working better than we hoped," Ryan replied, sitting down across from her. "Zephyrian cargo ships are being delayed an average of 6 hours at every checkpoint. Their merchants are starting to complain about lost profits." Lisa smiled, but it was not a happy smile. 3 months ago, she had convinced the Galactic Trade Consortium to increase safety inspections on all vessels from systems with recent piracy activity. The Zephyrian Empire qualified because of the rebel attacks near their borders. It was perfectly legal and completely logical, but it was also slowly choking their economy. "How much money are they losing?" she asked. "About 2 million credits per day, and growing," Ryan answered. "Their trade representatives are demanding meetings with consortium officials." "Let them demand," Lisa said. "We control half the votes on the Trade Council. They can complain all they want, but the inspections will continue." Lisa stood up and walked to the window that looked out into space. Hundreds of ships moved back and forth between the station and the planet below. Most of them were carrying goods from one system to another, the lifeblood of galactic civilization. She was learning to use that flow of trade like a weapon. What about our other projects? She asked without turning around. Ryan checked his datapad. The legal challenges are moving forward. We filed complaints against the Empire in 17 different courts, claiming they violated diplomatic immunity when they executed Jake. Even if we lose every case, the legal fees will cost them millions. Good. And the information campaign? Better than good, Ryan said with satisfaction. News services across human space are running stories about Jake's execution every week. The Empire's reputation is falling fast. 3 major corporations have already canceled trade agreements with them. Lisa turned back to face him. They killed an innocent man to save face after a military defeat. Now their face-saving is costing them everything. The plan was bigger than just trade disruptions and legal troubles. Lisa was building a network of contacts throughout the galaxy, people who had reasons to dislike the Zephyrian Empire. There were many such people because the Empire had made enemies during their centuries of expansion. Her computer screen lit up with an incoming message. The sender was listed as Marcus Webb, a human businessman working in the Outer Rim territories. But Lisa knew that Marcus was actually a spy working for Earth intelligence. She had been coordinating with him for 2 months. "What does Marcus have for us today?" Ryan asked, seeing the message notification. Lisa opened the encrypted file and read quickly. Her eyes grew wide as she processed the information. "The Andromedans are interested in our proposal." Ryan leaned forward in his chair. "The Andromedans? They have not talked to anyone from the Empire in 50 years. "Exactly," Lisa said. "And they have very long memories about what the Zephyrians did to their colony worlds during the border wars." The Andromedan Republic controlled a large section of space on the far side of the galaxy. They were peaceful now, but they had once been warriors who fought the Empire to a standstill. The war had ended in a treaty that neither side really liked, and old anger still burned on both sides. "Marcus says their trade minister wants to meet with us next week," Lisa continued reading. "They are interested in establishing new shipping routes that bypass Zephyrian space entirely." This was exactly what Lisa had been hoping for. If she could convince the galaxy's major powers to trade around the Empire instead of through it, their economy would collapse within a few years. The Zephyrians controlled several important hyperspace routes that connected different parts of the galaxy, but there were other routes, longer and more expensive, that could be used instead. "Set up the meeting," Lisa told Ryan, "and contact our friends in the Centauri Federation. If the Andromedans are willing to bypass the Empire, the Centaurians might be interested too." Ryan made notes on his datapad. "What about the rebels in Zephyrian space? Have we heard anything from them?" Lisa's smile became more genuine this time. "Actually, yes. It seems some anonymous benefactor has been providing them with intelligence about Imperial troop movements. Strange how rebels who used to lose every battle are suddenly winning." The truth was that Lisa had been feeding information to rebel groups throughout the Empire. Human intelligence services had been monitoring Zephyrian military communications for years, but they had never shared that information with anyone before. Now carefully selected data was finding its way to rebel leaders who knew how to use it. "The Empire is starting to ask questions," Ryan warned. "Their intelligence services are looking for the source of the leaks." "Let them look," Lisa said. "They will never suspect that their real enemy is a human diplomat sitting in an office on Haven Prime." She walked back to her desk and pulled up a star chart on her computer screen. Red dots marked Zephyrian territory, while blue dots showed systems controlled by their enemies and rivals. Green dots marked neutral systems that could be convinced to join their cause. "Jake always said that space was too big for any one empire to control forever," Lisa said, staring at the map. "He was right. The Zephyrians have grown too large and made too many enemies. We are just helping their enemies work together for the first time." Ryan stood up to leave, then paused at the door. "Do you think Jake would approve of what we are doing?" Lisa thought about that question for a long moment. Jake Morrison had been a good man who believed in peace and exploration. He had never wanted to hurt anyone or start any wars. But he had also been a human who cared about his crew and his people. "Jake would want justice," she finally answered. "Not revenge, but justice. The Empire executed an innocent man and they need to pay for that crime. We are not killing anyone or destroying planets, we are just making sure they face the consequences of their actions. Justice, Ryan repeated, nodding. I like that better than revenge. After Ryan left, Lisa sat alone in her office looking at the star chart. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled through fear and violence for centuries. They had conquered worlds, enslaved species, and executed anyone who opposed them. But empires that ruled through fear were also vulnerable to fear. She was teaching them to be afraid of something new, the patient anger of humanity, and the long reach of human justice. 2 years had passed since Jake Morrison's execution, and the Zephyrian Empire was falling apart. Emperor Valrock stood in his war room, staring at holographic displays that showed nothing but bad news. Red warning lights flashed across dozens of star systems where rebellions were spreading like wildfire. Your Majesty, General Crick said, his forearms gesturing at the displays. We have lost contact with the mining colonies in the Outer Rim. The rebels have captured 3 more supply convoys this week. Our forces are stretched too thin to respond to every attack. Valrock's purple skin had grown darker over the past months, a sign of stress among his people. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 500 years was crumbling, and he could not understand why. Every decision his military made seemed to be the wrong one. Every secret plan was somehow known to their enemies before they could act. How do they know our moves before we make them? He demanded, slamming his fist on the metal table. Our communications are encrypted. Our meetings are held in secure rooms. Yet the rebels always seem to be one step ahead. General Crix looked uncomfortable. Intelligence suggests there may be a spy network operating within our territory, but we have found no evidence of who is behind it. On the planet Kryn, the Empire's most important military fortress, Colonel Alex Stone crouched behind a fallen wall as plasma bolts flew overhead. Alex was not supposed to be here. Officially, he was a mining engineer from Earth who had come to Kryn to survey mineral deposits. In reality, he was one of Lisa Kane's most valuable agents. The shield generators are in the East Tower. He spoke quietly into his hidden communicator. 3rd floor, behind the armored doors. If you can take them out, the orbital defenses will go down. The voice that answered him belonged to Vera Santos, leader of the local rebel cell. Understood. My people are moving into position now. How much time do we have? Alex checked his watch. The guard shift changes in 10 minutes. That is your window. He had been on Kryn for 8 months, slowly gathering information about the fortress defenses. The rebels had been planning this attack for weeks, and Alex had provided them with everything they needed to succeed. Floor plans, guard schedules, weapon locations, and most importantly, the location of the shield generators that protected the planet from attack. The fortress was supposed to be impossible to capture. Its energy shields could stop any bombardment from space, and its walls were thick enough to withstand ground assault. But shields and walls meant nothing when the enemy knew exactly where to strike. Lisa Kane sat in her expanded headquarters on Haven Prime, watching the battle on Kryn through intercepted Zephyrian communications. Her operation had grown far beyond what anyone could have imagined. She now had agents on dozens of worlds, feeding information to rebel groups and coordinating attacks across the Empire. Kryn's shields are down, Ryan Brooks reported from his station. The rebel fleet is beginning their bombardment of the fortress. Lisa nodded but did not smile. Every victory brought them closer to their goal, but she took no joy in the violence. What about evacuation of civilians? Alex confirmed that all non-military personnel were moved to safety yesterday, Ryan answered. The rebels are following our guidelines about avoiding civilian casualties. That had been one of Lisa's most important rules. This war was against the Empire and its military, not against innocent people who happened to live in Zephyrian space. She had worked hard to convince rebel leaders that terror tactics would only turn the galaxy against them. The fortress on Kryn fell after 6 hours of fighting. It was the first time in 300 years that a major Imperial stronghold had been captured by rebels. The news spread across the galaxy within hours, and suddenly, everyone knew that the mighty Zephyrian Empire could be defeated. Emperor Valrock received the news while meeting with his advisors in the palace on the capital world. The holographic, Message showed rebel fighters celebrating in the ruins of the fortress, while Imperial flags burned in the background. "This is impossible," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Kryn was our strongest position. How did a handful of rebels capture it so easily? His chief intelligence officer, Minister Zara, stepped forward with a data pad in her hands. "Your Majesty, we have been analyzing the pattern of rebel victories over the past year. There are too many coincidences, too many times when they knew exactly what we were planning." "Speak plainly," Valrock ordered. "We believe there is a coordinated effort to destroy the Empire," Zara said carefully. "Someone with access to our military communications and strategic plans is feeding information to rebel groups across our territory. This is not random rebellion. This is organized warfare." Valrock stared at the burning fortress on the holographic display. Who would have the resources and knowledge to do such a thing? "We have considered several possibilities," Zara replied. "The Andromedan Republic has the intelligence capabilities, but they have been neutral for decades. The Centauri Federation lacks the coordination for such a complex operation. The human governments are too disorganized to manage something this sophisticated." "Then who?" Valrock demanded. Zara hesitated before answering. "We believe it may be the work of a single individual or small group with exceptional resources and motivation. Someone who understands our systems well enough to exploit them." Meanwhile, on a space station in neutral territory, Lisa Kane was meeting with representatives from 12 different rebel organizations. The meeting room was filled with beings from across the galaxy, united by their hatred of Imperial rule. "The fall of Kryn proves that the Empire can be defeated," she told the group. "But we cannot let success make us careless. They will be more desperate now, and desperate enemies are dangerous." A tall, blue-skinned woman named Commander Nova raised her hand. "Our intelligence network is the best any of us have ever seen, but we still do not know who our mysterious benefactor is. When will we meet face to face?" Lisa had been expecting this question. Her agents worked through intermediaries and encrypted communications, never revealing her identity. Even the rebels who benefited from her information did not know that a human diplomat was behind their success. "Your benefactor prefers to remain anonymous for security reasons," she said. "What matters is that the information continues to flow, and the Empire continues to fall." Another rebel leader, a reptilian being named General Rex, leaned forward in his chair. "The Empire's economy is collapsing too. Trade routes are closing and their allies are abandoning them. This is more than just military action." Lisa nodded. "The Empire has many enemies who have been waiting for the right moment to strike. Economic pressure, political isolation, and military defeats are all part of the same strategy." "Whose strategy?" Nova asked again. "Someone who understands that empires fall from within as much as from without," Lisa answered. "Someone who has been planning this for a very long time. Back on the Imperial capital, Emperor Valrock made a decision that would seal his fate. If there was a spy network operating against him, he would root it out no matter the cost. He authorized his intelligence services to use any methods necessary to find and destroy his hidden enemies." But Lisa Kane had been preparing for this moment too. Her network was designed to survive exactly this kind of crackdown. For every agent they caught, 10 more remained hidden. For every communication they intercepted, 100 others reached their targets. The Empire was learning what Jake Morrison had died to protect, that humans never forgot their own, and human patience was more dangerous than human anger. 3 years after Jake Morrison's death, the same Galactic Council chamber where he had been executed was once again filled with thousands of spectators. But this time, it was Emperor Valrock who knelt in chains on the black stone platform. His purple skin had faded to a dull gray, and his 4 eyes held the look of a broken man. Lisa Kane stood in the center of the chamber, no longer wearing the simple clothes of a diplomat. She now wore the formal robes of a special prosecutor for the Galactic Justice Council. Her voice carried clearly through the massive room as she read the charges against the fallen emperor. "Valrock of the Zephyrian Empire, you stand accused of crimes against galactic peace," she began. "Murder of diplomatic personnel, illegal execution of prisoners, torture of civilians, and the systematic oppression of subject worlds for over 2 decades. The Emperor raised his head to look at her, and for the first time, understanding flickered in his eyes. "You," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "It was you all along." Lisa met his gaze without flinching. 3 years ago, you executed Commander Jake Morrison in this very chamber. An innocent man died because your empire needed someone to blame for its failures. Today, your empire faces judgment for that crime and countless others. Behind her sat the emergency tribunal that would decide Valrock's fate. Representatives from 50 different worlds and species, many of whom had suffered under imperial rule for generations. The Andromedan Republic, the Centauri Federation, the Free Colonies, and dozens of smaller governments had all sent judges to ensure justice was served. Ryan Brooks stood in the witness section, wearing his old uniform from the horizon's edge. Next to him sat other members of Jake's crew, men and women who had traveled across the galaxy to see this moment. They had been freed by the Empire as a gesture of mercy, but they had never forgotten their captain's sacrifice. "The prosecution will now present evidence of the defendant's crimes," announced Judge Patricia Wells, the senior member of the tribunal. She was a stern woman from the Earth Colonial Administration, chosen to lead the proceedings because humans had been the primary victims of imperial aggression. Lisa activated a holographic display that filled the air above the chamber. Images of destroyed planets, enslaved populations, and burned cities appeared one after another. Each image represented years of suffering under imperial rule. "For 500 years, the Zephyrian Empire has conquered and enslaved entire civilizations," Lisa continued. "They have stripped planets of their resources, forced billions into labor camps, and executed anyone who dared to resist their rule." The Yi display showed footage from the rebellion on Krynn, where imperial forces had used chemical weapons against civilian populations. Other images documented the slave markets on Zetar Prime, where children were sold to work in the Empire's factories. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Emperor Valrock watched the images with growing horror. Many of these crimes had been committed by his father and grandfather, but he had continued their policies without question. The weight of centuries of oppression settled on his shoulders like a crushing burden. The defendant claims he was following ancient traditions, Lisa said, turning to face Valrock directly. But there is no tradition that justifies the murder of innocent people. There is no law that permits the enslavement of entire worlds. She walked closer to the platform where he knelt, her footsteps echoing in the silent chamber. 3 years ago, you told me that your ancient laws demanded blood for alleged crimes. You said that justice required Commander Morrison's death, even though he had committed no crime at all. The Emperor's chains rattled as he tried to straighten up. "He was in restricted space during an attack on our forces. Under Imperial law, that made him a spy and a terrorist." "Imperial law," Lisa repeated, her voice filled with contempt. "The same law that permitted you to torture prisoners for information they did not possess. The same law that allowed you to execute diplomatic personnel without trial. The same law that justified the slaughter of civilians who wanted nothing more than freedom." She gestured to the holographic displays still floating in the air. "Your empire has fallen, Valrock. Your armies have been defeated. Your allies have abandoned you, and your own people have risen in rebellion. The galaxy has rejected your ancient laws and chosen justice instead." The tribunal had spent weeks reviewing evidence and hearing testimony from witnesses across the galaxy. Former slaves told stories of families torn apart and children sold into bondage. Military officers described orders to destroy entire cities to make examples of rebellious populations. Scientists presented data showing how the Empire's industrial policies had poisoned dozens of worlds. But perhaps the most damning evidence came from the Empire's own records. Lisa's intelligence network had recovered thousands of documents that detailed imperial crimes in the government's own words. Orders for mass executions, plans for forced relocations, and budgets for slave labor operations were all presented to the tribunal. "The prosecution rests," Lisa announced after 3 days of testimony. "The evidence clearly shows that the defendant and his empire have committed crimes against the fundamental laws of civilized society. Justice demands that he be held accountable for these actions. Valrock's defense attorney, a nervous Zephyrian lawyer named Advisor Gurn, stood to present his case. But there was little he could say in the face of such overwhelming evidence. He argued that his client had inherited a system he did not create and had tried to reform it from within, but even he seemed to know his words rang hollow. The tribunal deliberated for only 6 hours before reaching their verdict. Judge Wells stood to address the chamber, her voice carrying the weight of galactic law. After careful consideration of all evidence presented, this tribunal finds the defendant guilty of all charges, she announced. The crimes committed by the Zephyrian Empire represent some of the worst atrocities in galactic history. The defendant, as the leader of that empire, bears ultimate responsibility for these actions. A murmur ran through the chamber as beings from across the galaxy absorbed the historic verdict. For the first time in centuries, a galactic emperor would face justice for his crimes. However, Judge Wells continued, this tribunal recognizes that the cycle of violence must end somewhere. While the defendant's crimes deserve the ultimate punishment, we choose a different path. Lisa felt a moment of surprise. She had expected the tribunal to sentence Valrock to death, just as he had sentenced Jake Morrison. The defendant is sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of parole, Judge Wells declared. He will spend the remainder of his days in solitary confinement, with time to contemplate the suffering his empire has caused. Additionally, all remaining Imperial assets will be seized to provide compensation to the victims of Imperial oppression. Emperor Valrock slumped in his chains. As the sentence was read, death might have been easier than spending the rest of his life thinking about what he had done. Lisa walked over to where he knelt and spoke quietly, her words meant for him alone. Jake Morrison was a good man who believed in peace and exploration. He died because your empire needed a scapegoat for its failures. His death has been avenged, but not through violence or hatred. She stood up and addressed the chamber one final time. Let this day be remembered across the galaxy. No empire, no matter how powerful, is above the law. No ruler, no matter how ancient their traditions, has the right to murder innocent people. Justice may be slow, but it is certain. As Valrock was led away to begin his life sentence, Ryan Brooks approached Lisa with tears in his eyes. Jake would be proud, he said simply. Lisa nodded, feeling a weight lift from her shoulders that had been there for 3 long years. The Zephyrian Empire was finished, its territories freed, and its victims finally had justice. Most importantly, the galaxy now knew that humans protected their own, even in death. The execution of one innocent man had brought down an entire empire, proving that sometimes the greatest victories come not from strength or violence, but from patience, intelligence, and the unwavering pursuit of justice.